Chapter 15. Later on, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said,
"I'm going to my wife's room."
But her father would not let him go in.
"I was so sure you thoroughly hated her,"
he said,
"that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead."
Samson said to them,
"This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them."
So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain, together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked,
"Who did this?"
they were told,
"Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend."
So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Samson said to them,
"Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you."
He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked,
"Why have you come to fight us?"
"We have come to take Samson prisoner,"
they answered,
"to do to him as he did to us."
Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson,
"Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?"
He answered,
"I merely did to them what they did to me."
They said to him,
"We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines."
Samson said,
"Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves."
"Agreed,"
they answered.
"We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you."
So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said,
"With the donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With the donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men."
When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramoth Lehi. Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord,
"You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?"
Then God opened up the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkore, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Chapter 16. One day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told,
"Samson is here!"
So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying,
"At dawn we'll kill him."
But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Some time later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said,
"See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver."
So Delilah said to Samson,
"Tell me the secret of your great strength, and how you can be tied up and subdued."
Samson answered her,
"If anyone ties me with 7 fresh thongs that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man."
Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh thongs that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him,
"Samson, the Philistines are upon you!"
But he snapped the thongs as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson,
"You've made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me, how can you be tied?"
He said,
"If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man."
So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, She called to him,
Samson, the Philistines are upon you.
but he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson,
Until now you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me, how can you be tied?
He replied,
If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man.
So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him.
Samson, the Philistines are upon you.
He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him,
How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength.
With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death. So he told her everything.
No razor has ever been used on my head,
He said,
because I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man.
When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines.
Come back once more. He has told me everything.
So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. Having put him to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him. And his strength left him. Then she called,
Samson, the Philistines are upon you.
He awoke from his sleep and thought,
I'll go out as before and shake myself free.
but he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god and to celebrate, saying,
Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands.
When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying,
Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain.
While they were in high spirits, they shouted.
Bring out Samson to entertain us.
So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand,
Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them.
Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord,
O sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes.
Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other, Samson said,
Let me die with the Philistines.
Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had led Israel 20 years. Chapter 17. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother,
The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it.
Then his mother said,
The Lord bless you, my son.
When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said,
I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord, for my son to make a carved image and to cast idol. I will give it back to you.
So he returned the silver to his mother, and she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith, who made them into the image and the idol. And they were put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some idols, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him,
Where are you from?
I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah,
he said,
and I'm looking for a place to stay.
Then Micah said to him,
Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food.
So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man was to him like one of his sons. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said,
Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest.